Welcome to Travels with Charlie, Vermont politics in real life. We're in beautiful downtown Montpelier at the State House. A nice sunny day today. I'm wondering where my guests are. Oh, here they come now. Won't you please welcome John Klar. He is a Republican candidate for governor. John, welcome to Montpelier. Come on down.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Nice to see you.
And also a Democrat candidate for governor, Rebecca Holcome. Rebecca, come on down.
Thank you. I like to think we're Democratic candidates, not Democrats.
We're going to start things off today. This is going to be real interesting because, and I should be ashamed, of Italian descent. I have no idea how to play the game of bocce. And I did find out that Rebecca is actually pretty good at contact croquet. So, but we don't want any contact today.
And it's a different game.
And it's a much different game. Let's get started. You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I guess I throw this out there and here we go. All right. I think we need a little grappa to make this good. What do you think?
You're gonna have to talk to your staff. That should have been a priority, the organization. All right, so
Rebecca,
you're gonna move
you can go
so
first.
I can be my appropriately 6 feet distance on camera, right? All right. Oh,
and I think that's good. Okay, John?
John, rocking it.
John's
pretty good.
So you get another one. Oh, that's not good.
All I have to do is not mess it up.
All you have to do is not mess it up.
John, you got 1 point, is that right?
So because Rebecca had the next second closest, I didn't get the second point. If I'd put the light, not that you care. But
now don't show off because you know all the rules and I don't.
Normally we'd have 4 balls each.
Oh,
so
okay.
We could really get into it.
All right. Let me ask you both, why would you want to run for governor at this time? It's going to be very challenging.
You know, when you go into public service, you're not going in to be there in fair weather. And to me, there's no time like now. It's more important than ever. And, you know, we're in the middle of a crisis, but we're actually in the middle of a health crisis, an economic crisis, an environmental crisis. We need real answers, and we're not getting that right now.
John, you have any second thoughts?
I don't think anybody can question that everything that whoever the governor is faced with and what Vermont is faced with has exponentially exploded. When we set out last year to identify the issues that were going to be important in 2020, the number one is the economy, including the pensions, the school system, and all of those problems have now been aggravated profoundly. So I don't know who would actually want such a difficult job before COVID, but we haven't had to change, I haven't had to change any of my platform because this is exactly what we had identified, and that number one issue is now more prominent than before. So I would argue that we even more need now the economic ideas that we're trying to propose.
Has your platform changed at all? I mean, do you have to kind of focus on different things, Rebecca, with what's going on?
No, I mean, we all saw in the poll that came out, the VPR poll back in October, that about half of Vermonters feel like they're struggling, no matter how hard they work.
Even prior?
Prior.
Sure.
I mean, the lack of broadband, we spent $150 million on broadband to push it into rural areas. Post the last recession, we got almost nothing for it. Now we just see even more how that failure to invest in our infrastructure is making it hard for economic recovery. I talked to business owner after business owner who says if they don't have broadband, they're finished. They're not going to make it through the year.
And broadband's even more important now we've got homeschooling. Would you agree?
I would, and from my understanding, it has been rather a costly enterprise, and hopefully too, we're seeing technological and other advances that are going to help reap some results there. But you would ask, your original question is, have we changed our policy list?
Yeah.
And I'd said I haven't had to, and yet I think we do have to have an eye to what's going on in the world. And, you know, COVID has introduced issues about the proper role of government and about constitutional issues, and there's a lot of an education for us all here, not just on a disease, but the Constitution and the effects on the economy of a shutdown. But another issue now is, you know, this movement for Black Lives Matter, which once again raises issues of how you balance that with constitutional protections for free speech, and we see this roiling the country. So we kind of have to become alert and aware to issues that may not have been our chosen issues, but we kind of have to be responsive to that. So again, it's all maybe part of the same ball of wax anyway.
We've seen in the widely publicized national incidents of police brutality against African Americans in other parts of the country, we've seen a response, a reaction. If you look at our demographic portrait as a state, we're getting older, we're less wealthy, we have fewer people, we have fewer young people. And the one demographic group that is still growing, that is more likely to be working than the average Vermonter, that is more likely to have a college degree than the average Vermonter, and more likely to be in manufacturing, is our people of color. It's our new American community. So this is an opportunity to see embracing the increasing diversity of the state as an economic opportunity. And to do that, we have to make sure that they feel valued and safe in our communities. And that's really on the rest of us. That's what I'm focused on, is making this a place where families want to be and can live well and get treatment if they need it, so that they're being treated for disease and not going to jail for disease. These are my priorities.
You want to address that, John? How are you going to, as governor, how
Sure.
would you address some of these issues?
There's nothing worse than a bad cop. There's nothing better than a good cop. And to denigrate all police because of the behavior of one is, I think, another crime. Our police need our support. To denigrate all people that are white because of what some white people did is similarly, to me, a form of racism. To characterize all police as harmful, we actually have we don't have enough state police in Vermont. We're not paying them enough. We have a shortage. And why would police want to take such a thankless job when they're being vilified by virtue of the worst common denominator assessment? And I would say similarly to our culture. You know, Vermont is not a white supremacist culture by virtue of being white, okay? We are, as just indicated, black people in Vermont are more likely to have a college degree than white people in Vermont. I think we're the only state where that's true. Are black people welcome here? Absolutely. Do we all want the same thing and everybody to have freedom and liberty? But as far as I know, the statistics used in Vermont to characterize all of our police as somehow victimizing black people are based solely on our incarceration rates and other things without looking at other causes. Connection doesn't prove causation. If a black person is guilty in Vermont of a crime and they get arrested and go to jail, they've just bumped us demographically up like an astronomical percentage, and it doesn't mean our police or our judges or our lawyers are inherently racist.
I just want to pick up on what you said, John, because I think this is a really important conversation, actually, that we need to have as Americans. You know, and I've got a brother who's a brother-in-law who's a state trooper, and has been struggling with this issue as well. And I think I'm just going to talk about my own field of education, where we have seen conclusive data that suggests that just the way we're socialized affects what we notice. And you know, they've done experiments where they track eyes of teachers who teach kids as young as preschool. And it's not that black kids misbehave more, it's that we're socialized to look for the difference in ways that catch black kids when they do things that look like misbehavior. And that's what we see in traffic stops. And one of the reasons we focus on these public incidents is we're not actually collecting data in Vermont that would speak to whether our officers are actually having more contact with our black citizens in other contexts. So I guess for me, I have seen too much evidence in my lifetime that makes me conscious of the need to have a little humility. I've spoken to too many students who've talked to me about their experience here. And if we want them to be able to bring their best game to building a bright future for Vermont, I need to hear what feels like a barrier to keeping them from being economically successful and being part of our bright future.
Check this out. Whoever's elected governor, you'll have your security will have his own parking place right here. That's very cool. So that's something to look forward to. Looking forward to the next legislative session, the new governor. There's going to be obviously a huge deficit, and there's maybe some new taxes, some cuts. Your thoughts on that, Rebecca?
You know, this is a tough issue, and one of the things that the legislature has done is sort of pushed out a bit because we don't know fully what our revenue forecast is, and we also don't know what full help is going to be available from the federal government. So I think they are being cautious as they think about how to manage the next couple of years. A lot of this year is baked, so the real issue is next year, and we are looking at a huge shortfall. There's no question about that. And you know, we've got some twin challenges here, because when you cut state government or you cut assistance to school districts, you're actually pulling cash out of our economy, possibly in ways that and away from workers at a time when we need to keep people working and keep people moving and cash moving in the economy. Because right now, when you see those people lining up at in Berlin or at Burlington, it suggests that the degree of food insecurity we have right now in the state is far beyond what our initial data would suggest. It could be a third of Vermonters. And people need to eat. People need to eat right now. They need cash right now so that they can take care of their families. You know, even before we went into the school lockdown, a third of our high school students were feeling so depressed that it was interfering with their life activities. Think of what's going on right now. We don't fully know the landscape, and I think one of the reasons the legislature and the governor, frankly, are being a little cautious is we expect more aid to be coming from the federal government. The most effective way to solve our tax problem right now is to repeal the Trump tax cuts. We need to make sure that those of us who can are bearing some of the cost and the responsibility for getting us back on our feet, because we all suffer when we don't. And that's what we do for our neighbors.
John, taxes or cuts?
So
Next.
it will not surprise Rebecca to learn that I have a very different perspective.
I know you do, John. That's why I love coming and hearing you.
And so, yes, and I do have a background. I was a tax attorney near the top of my class, UConn Law, and I worked for 3 years with PricewaterhouseCoopers doing tax returns for wealthy people. And I studied economics for years, and I'm also an opioid recovery coach, and I see that our economic decline, which has preceded COVID, has led to some of the highest rates of opioid addiction in the country. We see increased rates of domestic violence and suicide, which the response seems to be to keep taxing people and take away their guns so they can't kill themselves. The real problem is economic failure. So if you really want to help Vermonters, then you need to let them allow some of their own money to stay in their pockets. Our healthcare costs are getting higher and higher. They're the 4th highest in the country. Our school costs are the 2nd highest in the country. Our welfare benefits are the 4th highest in the country. And the answer, we're told, is now that we see everybody suffering, we need more government. So we have to cut because we can't tax any higher.
Let's find out a little bit about the candidates. Some may know a little bit more about each of you, but give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your background. As you know, Rebecca was Secretary of Education. You've also worked as a teacher, a principal, so a huge background in education. John, surprised, I don't think there are too many, although maybe in Vermont it might be a little more common that you can be an attorney and also a farmer. How would you see your background helping you as governor of this state, and how do you see that as a plus or as a positive against the current governor or against any of your opponents?
Thomas Jefferson observed that the farming agricultural foundation of our society, and in his time the vast majority of our federal and state legislators were farmers. I don't know that there's a single farmer left in our legislature. When I call myself a farmer, it's not like I've made any money at it, but I have tried making money with just about everything for about 20 years now. I'm also told that we don't have any practicing attorneys in there anymore, except Joe Benning. I think he's the last one. So I bring both of those qualifications. And so to bring those two disciplines together, plus my training as an opioid recovery coach and some of my other experiences in life, I believe is exactly the right package for what Vermont needs right now, which is to trim government and support farmers.
Rebecca, your background in education, principal, Secretary of Education.
Yeah, well, you may or may not know this about me, but I actually spent most of my childhood in places like Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Sudan, places that were torn by war and where there was grotesque income inequality, where people didn't have free and fair elections, where people could debate ideas. In fact, there was usually state media and 99% of the vote went to whoever was in power. And I think what that did was teach me a reverence for our institutions of government, and it made me mindful of how powerful the kind of process that we're engaged in right now, where we get to stand here and actually disagree respectfully and share ideas. And one of the things I like about working in public education is that when you are working in a school district in Vermont, and we have a very decentralized system, you have to work with everybody, and everybody's opinion matters. And it's the only place I know still where you have to look face to face with your community members and talk about what your hopes and dreams are for the future of your community. And when communities come together and they vote on their school budgets, that's their instantiation, that's their vision for the future of their kids. And embedded in it is what they think the opportunities are for their kids in the future. And that's what I want to do. You know, when we do our jobs well in state government, Vermonters can get on about their business and make their own lives. And that's what I want to do.
So as we look forward, a couple of terms that you hear quite often, it's like unprecedented times and the new normal. As we move forward, and we already know for this year, no festivals, no fairs, that's a loss of tourism dollars, a loss in tax dollars. What should Vermonters be prepared for in the next year, the next 5 years?
I've actually been writing for years, you can see on my website, about the threat to Vermont of a depression-like collapse, and that we're not prepared for it. We're seeing what happens when you don't have fundamental industries that actually grow and produce goods for export and you shift to a service industry. In view of what's happening with COVID, it's made us question a lot of questions also about the role of government and the powers of government, how much they should rescue people in poverty. And we're moving in a situation where people are saying more and more government should be the solution to all answers, to all problems. And fiscal conservatives say government has got too big, and no matter how much you desire to have it grow, you can't afford it. So a year from now, I think we still need to bring costs down.
Rebecca, what should we be prepared for?
Well, I just want to, another point of agreement. I do agree that we need to think about how to diversify our economy. We're the state with the highest proportion of our private sector employment in the nonprofit sector. We are heavily dependent on recreation and tourism, and it was the first sector to go in COVID-19. It's probably going to be the one that struggles to come back. We have pretty limited employment in manufacturing. It's one of our high-wage, high-growth sectors. But we also can't always talk about loss and fear and challenge, because one of the other things I didn't tell you about myself is I'm a co-owner of an inn, and I know if we don't invest in new beds and new mattresses, no one's going to come to my inn. Sometimes you have to spend money to make a little money, and there are sectors that are high wage, high growth sectors where if we had people with the skills, those businesses could hire and grow, and they don't right now. So there's an incredibly important role for education, for our college system, in terms of preparing young people and reskilling people who've been dislocated into those places where we know there's opportunity. And that's what I'd like to see us do.
I think you both agree. It's pretty much, there's a lack of the normal type campaigning that you've done in the past. How many doors have you knocked on in the past 2 months? Rallies, zero,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's got to be a huge challenge. How are you working your way around that? Rebecca, how are you working your way around all of that? Is social media helping at all? Do you find that?
Sure.
I mean, honestly,
more than you ever have, I got to tell you, people kind of like these virtual house parties because you don't have to clean your house and you don't have to pay for food. You just invite your friends. They all bring their own wine and beer and whatever, and you just have a virtual house party.
And they can kind of leave without anybody knowing. And they can leave. Hit the button and walk away.
And if you're in your pajama bottoms, no one cares. I mean, it's so I think you just have to have a sense of humor. And we've found that we are meeting tons of people virtually. I think there's a real difference on the Democratic side of the aisle. There seems to be a commitment to engaging in debates. We've had a number of public forums and debates.
Yeah.
I actually, John, I kind of feel sorry for you because I don't think you've had that opportunity to debate. And I grew up in countries where the sitting leader got 99% of the vote. There was no debate because it was state media. I just think we're all better off if we are actually able to debate ideas, because the state needs to know that we are on the right path. The only way we know we're on the right path is if we get to test our ideas.
Well, it's funny because I feel like I live in Afghanistan where 99% of the media and 99% of the legislature are progressives, and we don't get much of a voice. And not against you at all.
John, you're hurting my feelings. I just threw you a softball.
She said she felt sorry for me. No, because I think actually Phil Scott is highlighting how he's abusing his incumbency and his greater visibility. I've never run before, and it put the total ixnay on everything right in the midst. We had a whole slate of events in March that got canceled. So we did switch to a social media presence, and we switched to short videos, which people watch, and Klar2020.com, we've grown astronomically. But about 2 weeks ago, Governor Phil Scott said that people who were protesting Black Lives Matter were not going to be compelled to comply with COVID regulations because they were exercising a constitutional right. Little is more foundational to our constitutional freedoms than running for a campaign, especially when you're an insurgent grassroots group running against a very powerful and well-established incumbent. I know as a lawyer and a constitutionalist that I have every bit as much right. It isn't one right's bigger than another right. The governor has eunuched my campaign. The governor has manipulated his power to say a liberal group who are protesting to raise money for Joe Biden and the DNC have an open, free carte blanche to do what they want, and we can't. The moment he did that, I shifted back to events. I will be at events. I'm not trying to provoke that, but I will not be held back from my constitutional liberties while my opposition is free to do what they want. And they're not even identifying very specific policies, and we are. So game's on. As far as I'm concerned, we're through the COVID crisis, and it was not as bad as Ebola. It was more like Hong Kong flu. We know now from the science, thank God, that it's not as bad as we feared from the numbers out of Italy.
So I would say maybe we're not through it yet.
We'll see.
But I also would offer that you can assemble virtually, and what we've been doing is having virtual debates, and there are plenty of ways to do it without putting people at personal risk if they're anxious.
Time to give you the magic wand where you get to wish for anything you'd like, typically on topic. John, you won our bocce match, so
you go first.
I'm going to give you the wand.
I want to know what your wish is.
First.
Wow, give me some parameters. What would be my wish?
What would be your wish? If you could wish for anything today, what would it be?
I haven't given this one much thought. Can I get back to you on that one?
No.
That's the lawyer's answer.
No.
Yeah, so I'm brokenhearted about the racial division in our society right now. I've spent my whole life with a family and my kids raised in a way that we've always fought against this kind of stuff. And I'm not sure it's going in a good direction right now. And without getting into that, that would be one of my biggest wishes, is that we could all come together, whether black or white or red or blue, and here in Vermont as well, and not be about Donald Trump or not Donald Trump, because as you said about these problems, they're going to be here afterwards, and Donald Trump didn't create our school problems, and he didn't create our problems with our economy or our unique demographics and our unique geography, which has always made it tough for Vermont to do anything other than cows. And it's not even good for cows. It's too cold and hilly and rocky and wet. And here we are.
Besides, goat cheese is pretty good.
And I've milked goats, and I had a cheese house, and I made goat cheese.
I'm down with the goat cheese.
So I'm a believer.
Yeah.
I just wish we could all come together as people and have better conversations.
Rebecca, you get the wand.
Well,
Wave it.
I was tempted to say I only get one wish. Come on. I have to say, when we look at what's happening nationally across the nation, we are so torn and we are losing our way on some of our core ideals. And I think we may feel differently about how we got there, but I think we agree we've lost something. And I'm going to go back to what I said. As one of the things I appreciate about working in public schools, I didn't agree with everybody I talked to. I didn't even always agree with my school board chairs, but I appreciated that they heard me out and I heard them out. And I felt that we came to compromises that worked to make the best deal we could for the people in our community. And what I hope for in Vermont is we get back there. When I was Secretary of Education, I had people in my leadership team who didn't agree with me, because that's how I held myself accountable for being honest to the concerns of Vermonters. We need people to challenge us. It's how we get better. Now, I do believe in government because, as Abraham Lincoln said, government is how we do together the things we can't do for ourselves. I don't think there is a future that doesn't involve strong public education. That's why it's in our Constitution, because our forefathers, hopefully now we have some foremothers, thought the same thing. And I do believe that there is a role for government in protecting people when terrible stuff happens, as it has during COVID-19, and in creating opportunity. When you think of some of our biggest market opportunities, there was often government behind them somewhere, taking care of some of the risk and pushing it forward. And so I do believe there is a role for government. And I think we need strong, healthy, responsive government that's frugal and values tax dollars the way taxpayers do, but creates value for them by creating opportunity in the future. And that's what I'll do as governor.
Thanks again to my guests for joining me today. And when we chose the date, I had no idea it was going to be like 90 degrees and sunny. We've kind of moved around, and finally we ended up in the shade here. But again, thank you both for coming out. Rebecca Holcome from the Democrats, one of the candidates for governor, along with one of the candidates from the Republican Party, John Klar. Thank you both for being with me today. And I'll want to remind you that you can see more episodes of Travels with Charlie on Facebook and YouTube. And I'll see you in my travel.
Share what's on your mind. It's time well spent.
Beam me up. Come on.
President.
Hey.
Though we may not agree.
Beam me up.
Let your thoughts run free.
There we go.
You can have your turn if you feel the burn. I'm on back road gravel.